Okay then. What accept this? There we go. Nope, wrong one. Actually, load the correct save. Welcome back to Earthbound. Do I even remember how much money I have on me? $1. Yep. Sounds about right. Probably put on my support glove. And watch everyone sweat. Well, I've been waiting too long. Someone's been hit with something. Oh, there we go. Paula has died. Oh, everyone's now dying. It's fine. She's got a heat stroke. Needs an ice cream in the face. Hold on a second, you haven't got enough money. This is a mole. Why is this here? Well, I had a massive sunstroke. Okay, just random dude hovering in midair. Well, at least the dying is relatively light. The fuck? Rested Buka. Rested Buka smacked in the face. Very hard. I do need to explore as fast as possible, especially if people are getting heat stroke. Real condition. Don't forget to hydrate. Scorpion. Now this is a reference to World War I. Oh, Skelpion. Oh, we got mini UFOs are back. Ooh, 100 damage. Damn, that was quick into hurting me.
Mankind discovers pants.
Oh, very funny, Bob.
I mean, pants would not be useful in this situation. Pants would actually be probably one of the worst things you could be wearing right now. Why is that dog so intent on trying to kill me? As if there were... Oh, it's a desert wolf. That doesn't look like a wolf. That looks like a buffalo that has gotten in the way. Fire and paralysis. Okay. One, so let's just shoot it down. So many weird status effects in. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh dear. Seems familiar. I hear something, but I'm going to reserve for the minute. Wait, didn't I just kill this buffalo? Why is it still alive? It's rather concerning. Wait, what? Okay. Poison really that bad? Okay, it is, and she's been recovered. Poison. Poison hurts. Well noted, game. Well noted. Ooh, PSI caramel. Useful. Very, very useful. Bad buffalo now. Not the bold buffalo. Let's see if I can save this quickly before she receives any mortal damage. No, never mind. You know what kids need is nutrition these days? Let's just ram burgers into her. Got a lot of food. Yeah, I've got quite a bit of food actually. Oh, no. Ah, it doesn't matter, because there's still the crested booker in the back. Uh-oh, now it's a problem. Damn it! Yeah, the sounds is your table thumbs. Probably is. Because that's the Yeti for you. It's a very sensitive microphone. Like I have no way of controlling that. Oh baby. Like I've done as much as I can to limit the sound emitting from it, but there's only so much I can do. Like this is a very wide sensitive microphone and it's a USB one. I'd rather have an XLR. But that would require me to be in my own home. Not with what I may as well call my travelling setup. Nope, just went in the buffalo's ass. Be certain I didn't turn the gain up on this, but whatever. It's a hard microphone to get right. I need an actual decent one, and that requires money. And I think I bought this one at the time where it wasn't. I didn't have any. It's a warehouse deal. I got it for maybe £50. Oh, I'm starving. Do I have any food? Yeah. What am I going to give you? You know, here's a burger. No, I could have just waited. So if I can move I can move the mic slightly, but it doesn't matter. Like, this laptop keyboards are noisy as well. I don't like them. But then I can't get anything else for it yet. Especially considering the amount of room I have on this desk. Okay, I think 50% of the desk space is taken up by just the laptop and the microphone. Oh, Boiler's got a heat stroke again? Is that just bad RNG, or is that all I'm going to receive? I also did have an offer for a job to go back home, but I've not had any follow-up on it yet. But then you'd still be waiting 2 months for me to get to get back in my home for my decent connection, and I'm still looking into it. Well, everyone's now getting heat stroke. Yay! What a wonderful, wonderful thing. I could always change the... Oh no, all I'd do is just make a mess. I could change the... It has thunder. Okay. I could change the polarity of the catchment area, but then that will just probably make a mess of everything. Can't even remember which one's on at this point. I think it's on, I think it's on forward conical or something. That's my healing spot. Okay, I just brought in a random cute little UFO. Random picnic lunch. Big heal. What's this? Big bottle rocket. That's a Jeff thing if I've ever seen it. Gonna comb the desert for a little bit because I think there's something here, but I'm not sure what it is. The enemy has stopped moving. Maybe it will not notice me. I'm wondering now how much it would be to... Oh, fuck you. How quickly I could get an XLR set up, but then I'd have to junk the Yeti. Someone else who's got an excellent USB mic, how they make it not sound like they're constantly hammering on things. Though then they've got probably mechanical keyboards and stuff, so... Not a dainty little laptop that sounds like it should be plugged in into the Museum of Sound. Oh, no, 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 she's gonna die before anything happens, doesn't matter. Like, no way was I skipping through all that dialogue before anything happened. Because, getting hurt and falling over, guaranteed. Oh, I have to find the cabin again. Also, Steam sale is up. Don't know whether I want to look into it or not. $1,000 Oh, you just put $1,000 on me. Great. What is this? I'm lugging around an angel. I think whatever this mariachi band is doing is the least of my concern. Okay, yeah, close to cabin now. What the hell is that? And do I really want to engage it? Move my one side. Oh, I see angel wings. I think she's properly dead now. Yep. Have to go find a doctor. So there's a lot of Morse code in the background. They both got heat stroke, yes. If I do get into foresight, I could just, you know, pick up better weapons and kill everything. Okay, which I have managed to do, so. I think, okay, I was not expecting the killer taxi. Oh, we got crying. Okay. Remember, Ness is crying. Taxi looks so damn cartoonish, it's unbelievable. Really need the hospital. Before I go anywhere near anything. Yeah, you've got a body. No, I didn't mean to do that. Let's remove all this heat stroke and stuff, because it's really annoying. Yep, sunstroke. Why do I know about sunstroke? Because I've had it before. It's not fun. It is the worst thing you could have. Then I'm gonna go do things in like an order of operations going forward, because I know I've received a temporary closed. Ah, fuck off. Can I not go in? Or do I have to go and speak to someone else? Okay, I'm just wandering around here because I just wanted to go to the department store. Well, I found where he was. Okay. I'm pretty certain I still need to do things in the desert. Let's deposit my money first, and then talk with... Even though I haven't been in the desert long, I imagine there's still something there. I just came to Foresight because one of my party members was dead. Desert was after Graveyard. Desert is after Graveyard. I haven't been to the ocean yet. This is the thing, this shows how little I know about Earthbound, because I've never really watched it, nor even played it until now. All I knew was a game that had quite a cultural influence on indie developers. And then my brain just went, boop, gone. It's a complete mystery, and as soon as I actually fix a few things, that means we're going back to Final Fantasy IV, because I've managed to make it run. That's fine by me. Pig's butt. Hmm. Okay. The game was having a 5 minutes. Never show my face. Well, I'm just gonna go back in that room and wander around. Make me. Obviously there is desert. Let's go back to the desert. I've seen like maybe one small bit of the ocean. That's only because of when like being raided into Brood while he was doing speed runs of it. It's the same as like Mother 1. Like Mother 1, I knew no one was playing it. It's a difficult game to recommend. Oh, and of course, Lisa. How could I forget Lisa the Painful's reference to the... Oh, FF4 minigames. Oh, the DS ones. Minigames are not anything special. I think I've managed to maybe max a couple of them. I think the one that gives me the most problems is Edge's. Because Edge's one is not great. Got so much touchscreen flappery. You can, on PC, you can reconfigure the brain just, oh, I just had sunstroke as soon as I got here, fuck off. You can, in all sense of the words, rig the mouse to be a stylus. But it's difficult. Like, I was going to run into the problem eventually anyway, because I want to do Sonic Rush. I do like Sonic Rush. Sonic Rush is a nice game for me to... Okay, thanks. Okay, Ness is getting fucked up. Let's kill them quickly. Like, I think there was also a point where I wanted to play Metroid Prime Hunters again, so I could actually finish it for a change. Problem is, it needs, like, there is a dedicated script online somewhere, I think there's at least 2, to rearrange everything to play on keyboard and mouse. I just haven't figured out how to do it yet. I am not a programmer, I'm just a dipshit that knows how to talk, knows how to make strange sentences out of nothing. Ooh, this isn't good. PSI tends to rip through me, and it does. Damn it. Fucking That. Oh, no, 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 not again. Oh, fuck. Well, back to... hospital. There's got to be something out here just like Mother 1. I'm playing the same game as Flutter. Wait, I'm playing Earth. She's playing Earthbound? Is she? I'm really confused. Time to play hospital games? Oh, oh yeah, I see what's going on there. He's playing... Was it 2 Point or was it something else? Hospital game. It's not 2 Point. He was playing a different one. Forgotten what it is. Let's avoid enemies and get my ass to the hospital. Oh, hint guy's here. Might be worth talking to. Let's use things... Stiff ghosts, yeah, they can only move in a... an 8 direction. There are 5 apples. What the hell? Mr. Motoli's here. I mean, yeah, obvious bar is obvious. Back in the 90s, and I think still relevant today, where lawyers were considered fodder for punching to death. Do you have grandchildren at your age? Yes. Although how is anatomically impossible. Obviously not got any money, so let's go back to the hotel. Pick up $300. You never gave me a tip? No, I've only just got here. Unless you're like part of a clown show, which somehow travels from place to place. Because I have seen Fourside at least once. And that's because it's the Smash Brothers stage for Earthbound is either on it or it's Fourside. Apparently there's no other places in the Mother universe. Like, there are no other well-known places, not even Mother 3, providing you with well-known places. Which is interesting, that... $75, yes please. Ah, there's only one hint a day. Which... okay, an Earthbound 2, which turned into Mother 3. Well, it turns into Mother 3 DD, and then Mother 3. So I think that's probably for the best they went back to sprites, because those 3D models... yikes. Oh, I've got to buy another ticket again. Give me $5. Just 5. Because I think in the Fourside map, like, Mother 3 shows up anyway, one of the enemies turns up. Oh, okay, I've set in motion already freeing the runaway 5. Because of course I have, because I have no idea what's going on. So that set in motion everything I think I need to get rid of them. That gets me at least started on Fourside, but I just feel like something needs to be done in the desert. Also, now they're not Runaway 5, they're 6. So even your name is a lie. Even though I know it's a reference to the Blues Brothers. Very elongated one. I think is an actual... I think I learned today it was an actual band. Dan Aykroyd did sing, which is a very frightening thing to think about. And let me just check my goods. Okay, I lost my show ticket, so I'm just gonna have to re-buy one when I get in. It's not infinite like the last one. Like, I needed to do the desert for the gold. It just makes me feel like, you know, like the cactus in Mother 1, which was just randomly in the desert. I just feel like there's a sanctuary place out there, but I just can't put my finger on where. And I haven't got sunstroke yet, but we should probably be hitting it really soon. There we go. Everyone's starting to sweat, which means sunstroke is not far behind. How did you get sunstroke underground? This is meant to be the cool place. You don't have to think about sunstroke. Beat 5 big moles. Oh, there's one. And I found the middle one. Let's do a big PK freeze and spy on it. Try and paralyze it as much as I can. Vulnerable to PK flash, so being blinded. I just tend to have a habit of finding the weird ones first. Not very good level ups, but they'll do. IQ capsule. Who do I even want to ingest the IQ capsule? Probably Paula. Like, I think Jeff's at a point where his IQ is enough to be able to repair things, but I have to just kind of force him to do it. Oh, okay. I found the hermit card. Yeah, did it. Thank you. I want that PP back. That's the start of the maze. Now, can I heal Sunstroke, or is that what I have to... Okay, good. That Sunstroke was going to get really annoying after a while. There's another mad duck. And it is as weak as the original mad duck. Not that I'm complaining. I like some easy fights for a change. Oh, you got poisoned again. Just eat the snake. Just eat him. Eat him and then he'll be able to give you his power of poison. This game loves poisoning me at the moment. Did I bring my Aunt Dot? I did not bring my Aunt Dot. All I brought was some kids. There are 5 moles in this big place. You have found and fought to exactly 1. But the amount of trash in here, pretty big. A croissant. Please take my son. My son needs to get out for a change. Good lord, how much... That's meant to be a big ant. Well, by all standards it is a big ant. There's the moles. That's a lot of mad ducks. That is a lot of mad ducks. This has no PP. I should really not have been surprised. Ah, mole. Okay, that was even easier than the first one. Good. Let's get rid of the skip sandwich. Platinum band. It's a big jump in defense. I shouldn't have eaten a skip sandwich if I was going to sell things. So how many have I done? I've done 2 moles now. Just 2. Okay, nothing has PP. Nothing at all. I just realised the Mad Dog has feet. It has actual human feet. This is the exit mice again. Actually, is the gigantic ant, like, weak enough that I can hit it to death? Ah, you have PSI, do you? Gimme. That's the second most experience in here, except for moles. Right, 3rd mole found. Oh, no, no, no. Come on, Ness. Ah, she went down. Fuck. PK Flash Beta. Okay, that's fair enough. We should have some noodles somewhere. I thought I had some noodles. Shite. If I find some noodles, I'm immediately just wrenching that shit into my gut, into her gut. That removes the ant out of my way. Let's head downstairs again. Damn it, did not need that drained. What's this? Super bomb. Why are there so many newsmen? Okay. We have one. So much experience that now poor Paula is missing out on. Again. Again. Why am I always poisoned? It's the exit mice. I'm going to be pretty high level by the time we get out of here. That's 5 newsmen. 5. I see your mad duck and shoot you in the face. And shoot the mad duck in the face. And here comes the main problem. Oh no, PSI still works. Should kill most of them. More IQ. Excellent. Life up. Gamma. Do you have any actual food that's not on Paula? Oh, okay. Somehow being able to casually loose a ghost body. Another mole here. Maybe? What's in this? Calorie stick. Mm. There's a molt. They're very interested in being threes. Oh, you have a power shield? Ew. Okay. Now he's in a bad situation. Let's throw a bomb at him. Okay. Everything will oh no. Protected. He was uncovered. Okay, I am in real bad shape. Okay, I think I'm going to take that exit mouse soon. Coin of defense. Don't worry, yes, if you survive, the game continues. If neither of you survive, we won't warn you. Oh, what the fuck? Well, I'm gonna lose Jeff. Or not. Coil Snake did not press its advantage. Well, now we die. Now we die. Oops, didn't mean to use the slime generator. Yep. Because, of course, we can't have nice things. I mean, Jeff is at least gaining health back. Somehow. Oh, don't start doing this. Like, as soon as I kill one, there's another one. Oh, now we are truly screwed. Unless I start stealing food from Paula's body, which I can't do mid-battle. I know if his condition is fatal. I'm trying to leave. Well, I'm getting dumped back to somewhere else. Because, oh, Jeff is running away. Good, Jeff. How much health have I got left? 34. Yep, that's it. Well, shit. Well, back to Threed, I suppose. I think Foresight is too far away by comparable distance. Or not. I could be full of shit. I'm just glad I had a little bit of money left over from that last one. L'Hôpital. Oh no, it's slightly less. It's fine by me. Seeing dead people, I think you want to go get a scene to. You might see Bruce Willis. Or M. Night Shyamalan. What's a cup of coffee do? Oh. I think it's time to call Escargot Delivery. And drop some more of these key items off, because I don't need them any longer. Hotel's further up. Like 3 didn't take that long, but it's just kind of weird. You now have 40 grand. Are you actually going to do anything with it? No. Take up to 3 things, okay. Take this. And this. Do I have anything else? Not really. Get rid of my stupid key items. What are you peddling? You have this coin of slumber. Okay. Got everything done now. Take a quick rest at the desert shack and see if I can get some stuff from the drugstore. Definitely some antidotes and some wet towels. Oh, this is slowly making progress, which is fine. I'm not in a hurry to finish it. It's not like Mother 1 where I just... Oh, Mother 1 streams like 4, 5 streams and it was done. I was conveniently happy that it was all nicely wrapped up and finished. See what that actually was. Okay, I can just buy a bunch of those. Really hurts is that there is no real decent way of this being, like this item inventory management being any good. Like I said, it was Mother 1, there's just too much chaff. Too little space, even though they upgraded it by 4 slots. I can't think of another game off the top of my head with such bad inventory management outside of a Western RPG. Like, understandably, for something like Might and Magic 1, it makes sense because that's basically being stored on a cassette, so you have almost 40 slots to play with. This has more space than a cassette. Let's just find which direction I was going in. Because I think I did a loop. Because that's the first hole I went in. I think I need to go somewhere near the exit sign mice. I should be back on track. God, Paul is very far behind in levels. What, Ness is almost 40, and Jeff's only 35. Lost out on a lot of experience. There was a chick. Wait, did I just get a... Okay. Which way did I come from? Down here? This is looking familiar. Yes, because there's a present I've opened. That might be the ladder I'm looking for over there on the right. I don't think I've come up this one yet. Oh no, I've been down this one. Right, that's a Guardian mole hole, so yeah, I've already done this bit. No, I think old Daddy-O's trying to reach me. Just that it's not, I can't, because I'm underground. Mobile phone signals do not go underground. Down this one? Yes, because that's another one that I've defeated, so I'm looking for one more hole. Ah, see a present I have not opened. There's a mole. Oh baby, defense went up by 5, guts 3, luck 2. Is everyone's status for guts? 30, 17, 19. I think it would make sense for Paula to get more guts, because she needs survivability. Oh hey, a teddy bear. Excellent. This is the hole that I went in? Yeah, because there's the open present. Yep, I think that's it. That's all the holes. Let's use my exit mouse and then come back in. Yep, mine has left, so he's probably found his gold. Time for more fuzzy pickles. Everyone's sweating in your face. Oh, where is the miner guy? Because he's going to have my gold nugget, and I want it. Where is he? He wandered into this tunnel and then disappeared. There's no more enemies, which just kind of makes this tedious, but I gotta find him. He's got my stuff. He's got my gold nugget. Okay, now I'm just a little bit more miffed. Oh, hello, present. There's one I didn't open. Maybe? Secret herb. Okay, I didn't open that one. No, it looks like miner guy has disappeared. That's being intentionally silly. Okay, yeah, that's all the gigantic mole sites, so evidently he has vanished for the minute. And all of today's stream has just been this. Just running around the desert. Let's go talk to some people out here. Okay, he has completely vanished off the face of the earth, so I don't quite know what I'm still doing here. Let's have a little bit more of a look around in the desert then, I suppose. Without engaging that sphere at all. Oh, okay. Let's hope I can just kill it fast enough. And hammer my way through the text after it explodes. Oh, it's now a chicken. Don't eat it, please. Okay. Giovanni, okay, so that was an extra thing I did because I could. Oh, good. Franklin Badge doing his job. Oh, no, 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 no. Come on. Die, 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 die. Damn it. Never mind. What a slap in the junk. Yes, we know we've just wiped out your party member. Let's give you a cookie. And then now Jeff is poisoned. Do you just hate fun, Earthbound? I have no money on me, so yep, gonna have to really hightail it here. And I shall just... Oh, I meant to go to Foresight after that. Okay. Didn't find gold, but found a diamond. There's that feeling when you feel just so defeated by some game's logics. So how much do I need? I need $300, and then I'll be able to revive my 2 compatriots, drop off the contact lenses, and then something else. Like, hopefully heal Gamma, Omega, whatever the hell they want to use as a symbol, will give me like what the super heal was in Mother 1. Well, the super heal is fine. It's actually very useful. Like it was a revive. It's a full revive. Okay, yeah, it cost 34 PP, but still, it was better than nothing. Where's the bakery? Thanks for your socks. What even are they? Pair of dirty socks. It's a one-use item. Well then. Shove a croissant in Ness and go and get that diamond. Everything done for the Runaway 5. What would be next? Probably to take on the building? Oh, I need some space anyway because I've got to free something up to deal with needing to buy a new pass to get into the theatre. I guess I'm done in the desert. Someone's got sunstroke. That red flash, and I was like, yep. Yeah, we're back to that. That honking sound is the chicken. Which at some point soon I may just ignore the game's advice and eat the chicken. Let's deposit my lint collection. There we go, that works. And what are we using the protractor for? Nothing! I don't care, I just want to talk to your manager. Made loads of money. You sure did. Let's drag him away. What's happening? I'm going to use the loo. And the band has exited. Actually, hold on. Are they still in the... God fucking damn it. Cat sounds. Oh, hello, Trigger. Sorry, I must have missed you turning up as soon as I went to the loo briefly during the Runaway 5 performance. Christmas shopping done. I don't have to do that. I have no one to buy Christmas shopping for. Not even myself. Well, there was no reason to go in there then. I hate bathrooms for the rest of my life. There are more reasons to despise bathrooms than that. Not entirely certain here. Still can't go in the department. Oh no, I can now go in the department store. It's still haunted. Store's haunted. I don't want that. I want just to see how much stuff I'm going to need to buy to update all my equipment? Two gold bracelets and a chef's frying pan. What a loser. Well, got a chicken. Do you want to mess with the chicken? Okay, I can get a few more things here. What money am I even gonna need here? Like, let's take out 10 grand. Buy everything. Wait, no, don't need that. So let's sell that cookie. That was just why. Oh no, she has something exactly the same. Oh, you've got a bunch of stuff. Right, tools. Give me that frying pan. Getting almost negative returns on half of that. And there we go. A lot of money, but it's done. Always the fabled $1, because you can't have cents in this game. No, I don't want to interact with that. I want to interact with the phone. Okay then. Oh, have we got mimics as presents now? Scolding teacup. Also, I'm missing Paula. If this doesn't scream Mother 1, I don't know what does. having inanimate objects start attacking. That is another one thing. Thanks, what did I get? Oh, that's a lot of presents. Is it more coffee? It's an electric guitar that has given up and deformed on life. Can I get in the office without being attacked? I am literally outside. Compose yourself. Oh, you'll go to heaven. What, am I a good boy? Ah, okay. Nothing I can do yet. Oh, not mortal damage. Ooh, that was lucky. Oh, he's gonna take some anyway. On Jeff. Wants to get rid of all my PP, doesn't he? Damn, I just feel like I'm getting hit and smacked back down and go back up. Well, at least he's not healing himself. That's probably the good thing. Oh baby, offense up by 3. Luck went up by 3. Excellent. Now I've got to go to the Monotole building. Let's see, how am I for how I probably need to go to the hotel quickly. I'm starting to get close to the end of 4 side. By the looks of things. No. 200. Don't know how much it is for a night here. 150. Okay, so I was close. Mysterious blackout caused by mouse. Sure was. What do you think about how much effort must have gone into guides for this game, and how much that you'd have to defeat an enemy and then go talk to your dad every single time that you want to find out what stats and stuff had been done? Now, I don't know what that beeping sound is, but I'm going to equate it to a chicken I have in my inventory. Where is Paula? Okay, not Pokey, whatever he is. Do something to get into Monatole's building. Oh no, you can go inside the dinosaur museum. Is your dad telling you to turn off the game? Okay, that's probably set off something else that needs to happen. I know who could help me get into the building, I guess. But I don't know where they've disappeared to. Is there any way to get behind the department store? Oh yeah, there we go. No, nope. Game is tricking me. Oh, I need to go underground. Oh, you've got the broken stuff. Hello, random taxi that wants to kill me. Oh, why are there so many mad taxis? I'm just here to go find something. Not fight the American transportation system. It's on private hands. Can I help you? So I learned there's like an audible clunk whenever the game wants to go into combat. Hey Bap, how's it going? You cry here in my cappuccino. My cappuccino that's made entirely of root beer and something else. There's a stadium here? Oh. What's happening here? You have this chicken. Oh, Everdred's turned up. Oh, the Mani Mani statue. Check behind the counter. Oh no, I've got into the Gabora loop. No. No, Mr. Everdred. I don't want to listen again. I forgot that happened. I'll tell you, only once. A maternal bell reader. I know Earthbound is very strange with its coding, so if you get a ROM hack, that's usually a blessing, I think, because most of the time it's just shifting all the data around. So that's what... Ooh. Okay, and there's a fire in here. And that's what, Robopump. That's what, Hallow's End does. It has to kind of just rework all of the characters into different ways so that they actually keep the coding to work. God bless you, Satoru Iwata. Making a very complicated game code. What am I being attacked by? So I hope Mother Encore still will do what it needs to. Actually finish and be made. It's actually a very, very good very good fan game. How am I for health? I'm okay for the minute. Probably save though, because I think this is an actual, like, going up and down of the Monotoli building. I do kind of want to know what's going on here. Oh, right, yeah, because there's a sequence where infamously Ness is in his pajamas, and in the Japanese version he's naked. Don't know why I remember that one specifically. Present. Double burger. We'll take your burger and we'll add another burger. That looks like the Monotoli building. Which reminds me I should probably pick up something from the scene sale. I'm thinking about it. Brain had a little puncture wound in the back of it. Don't think about getting past me, because you aren't a guy whose eyebrows are connected and has a gold tooth. What? What? Enemy. I know one of the biggest quality of life changes you can make to Earthbound, and it's called giving it a run button. It's very, very slow. I'm struggling to... Oh, my connection's gone unstable. That means it's the time of night I have to stop. Don't ask why. It's just at 9 o'clock on the dot. Every part of this internet connection that I am borrowing goes to shit. Yes, I miss my home one, because then I wouldn't have to deal with it. I'm going to Ipswich tomorrow. God, so I can talk to, like, a mobile broadband provider. See if I can get something better. Yeah, sorry if people have been here very shortly, but the internet quality around here is so terrible. So terrible that it's just unbelievably bad. So, I need to check what they're doing right now. I think I know, I saw someone else playing Earthbound. If that is that this internet connection is going to let me load anything. How far is he in? I think he's not very far in. Oh, I don't want to hear this because it'll probably have copyrighted content. The internet is so dead that it won't even load adverts so I can get to someone else's stream. You see why I'm wandering off to go and sort this out tomorrow? There's only so many months you can keep doing this.